Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to the privacy talk. I'm quite honored to invite Mr. Robin from Brussels this moment. He's working on the marketing data field and the privacy things. So there is a great honor to have a conversation with Mr. Robin. Thank you for coming this moment.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to share his profile. Robin is a communication and commercial director at FEDMA and a certified information privacy professional, CIPP. Before joining FEDMA, Robin managed the communication efforts at the European Interactive Digital Advertisement Alliance, EDAA. He carries a strong background in communication and public relations, spanning from the private, non-profit, and institutional spheres. He previously worked in the field of human rights with Human Rights, the One Campaign and United Nations. Passionate about the US politics, he worked with Democratic Abroad to help the 2020 Biden-Harris presidential campaign, and current leads the communication efforts for Democratic Abroad Belgium chapter. So again, great to have a conversation with Robin this moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
So yeah, let's get a start today's agenda. I'm very interested in your work because you have a variety of the experience and variety of the field involved as a professional of the data field. So could you tell us why did you start to work in the privacy field? Then is there any reason to come to this space?
Yep, absolutely. So my path to the privacy and data sphere came in 2018, actually. As you mentioned in the description, I used to work in the human rights field. I worked for Euromed Rights, which is a Mediterranean human rights organization, for several years. And in 2018, GDPR was coming into force, so the General Data Protection Regulation. And at the time, I was doing the communication for that NGO. And I was tasked to look into what the implementations would be on our website, on our privacy policy, and so on. At that time, I think for myself and for many people, GDPR was just an acronym that was difficult to grasp. But I actually got to learn a lot more into it. And 6 months after GDPR came into force, so I actually was able to change jobs to the EDAA, the European Interactive Digital Advertising Alliance, which focuses on transparency in digital advertising. And this is how I really got into the privacy field, is the interest that I got from the GDPR and how digital rights are, in a way, human rights to a certain extent. And it's important that, to find this balance, as we're going to discuss today, between right to privacy, but also right to innovation.
Yeah, thank you. I think you have a variety of things so far, as well as the more kind of a non-profit field. I used to work there. That was very important to help more social related activity. There is a very great opportunity. Then you come back to the data and advertisement field. And now you work at the FEDMA, where is a very interesting organization in Europe, try to coordinate the multiple stakeholders. So could you tell us about the FEDMA, as well as what are you doing there in the organizations?
Absolutely. So I am the communication commercial director for FEDMA. So FEDMA is the Federation of European Data and Marketing. We're an association that represents the interests of the data and marketing industry at European level. So we're a member-based organization that is basically combined of two types of organizations. There are national DMAs, or data and marketing associations, throughout Europe. And we also have industry organizations that work on different levels of data in some way or form related to marketing. So we have postal operators, consultancies, data brokers, all types of organizations that work with the same goal of, well, how to best use data in marketing, but also respecting the right to privacy. And that's where it's really the crux of our work, which I'm going to present today, is how we can strike that balance and how we at FEDMA try to lobby the European institutions in that sense to represent our members.
Cool. So under FEDMA, so what is your role in the final goals to achieve this reactivity?
Yes. Well, for this, I'm going to share a brief presentation. I will do this very quickly. So as I said, FEDMA represents the data and marketing industry in Brussels. We have roughly 40, 50 members throughout Europe, divided into two categories, so the data and marketing associations and industry organizations. Now, our policy priorities for the phase 2019 to 2024 there are 4 of them. So one is calling for a fair and efficient GDPR implementation. This is, as I mentioned before, GDPR came into effect in May 2018, but the implementation has been very different across the European Union. It's a one law for all 27 European member states, but the way it's implemented at national level often varies, and it makes it difficult for organizations who work in different countries to actually be compliant with these different ways of being implemented. So this is our first objective, is for fair and efficient GDPR implementation. Our second goal is, our priority is to drive online users' trust and communications. As I said, our objective is to strike this balance between the right to privacy and the use of data in marketing. And so we can only do that if we as an industry achieve the trust of users. That's really the fundamental, the foundation really of our industry, is gaining their trust. A third of the priority is obtaining a fair digital ecosystem. As I'm going to show later today, we have several other pieces of legislation at European level that are in the process, that are on top of the GDPR. And it's sometimes can be difficult, especially for SMEs, small and medium enterprises, to keep track of everything that's happening. And it needs to be fair for all players, whether they're big gatekeepers all the way to the small players who are trying to find their way in this difficult or complex ecosystem. And last but not least, our fourth priority is to create a coherent environment for our industry. So it's important that all actors in the data and marketing industry go in the same direction. And this is why FEDMA is so important to them, is that it allows to exchange best practices and to be a centralized actor where everybody can share what they're doing, what's happening, and what they would like to do, so that we can all work together for the benefits of both the industry and consumer rights.
Thank you. I assume that your organization is focusing on the more consumer-related activity. To the next topic, I'm going to start about the dialogue with you related to the effect of the GDPR. Probably the consumer is becoming serious their own data, since the privacy data protection regulation is upcoming. Especially for online advertisement industry, such as the cookie banners, such as the Google Analytics. There is many controversial activities probably in Europe. So what has been a change the online advertisement industry after the GDPR?
So, well, you mentioned the online advertising. So that's definitely a big aspect of marketing, which is often at the forefront of well, the news headlines, because it's definitely something that's very well, active and omnipresent for everyone online. But we need to put it back in place that marketing data in marketing is much broader than digital advertising. So any type of communication that goes from a company to a consumer, whether it's telemarketing, so phone calls, direct mail, so with postal operators, emailing, and of course, digital advertising and many more, they all fall within this, this big basket of the use of data in marketing. And what we've seen, as I've mentioned just before, is that there is an array of new regulatory updates that are being discussed at the European institutions that are going to be put in addition to the GDPR. So to start, there's the e-privacy regulation. So at the moment, there's still the e-privacy directive, which underpins all electronic communications. It's been in place for over 2 decades now, and it needs to be updated to, well, be more in line with our modern society, our digital society, and the digital ecosystem. This has been passed on from European presidency to the next for the past years. It first came, the first position was in 2017, and still now, 5 years later, we're still waiting for the final paper, but we are hopeful that it will be passed relatively soon. This will have an important impact, of course, for all our marketing channels, because it underpins, as I said, all electronic communication. A second and third to put together legislations that are almost done is the Digital Services Act and Digital Markets Act. So the Digital Markets Act is specifically focused at big gatekeepers. So the big players that are working online, and how they need to be more, well, of course, compliant, but also to allow fair competition and to avoid monopolistic approach to the data economy and data ecosystem. The Digital Services Act, now to go back to your original point of digital advertising, the Digital Services Act has a very important Article 24, that deals with transparency in digital advertising. And this is really the crux of what we're working on about digital advertising. And going back to the EDAA, the organization I used to work for, but I'm also now their vice chair on their board, helps to do just that, to increase the transparency in digital advertising, specifically tailored advertising, so that consumers can see why they're receiving these ads, why they're seeing them, but more importantly, they can opt out. So they can decide, I do not want to receive ads from these companies or this type of ads, and they can do so through Your Online Choices, which is a platform that the EDA manages that allows consumers to choose. It gives them transparency, choice, and control, which are the 3 pillars of the EDAA. And these are in line with the transparency requirements in the Digital Services Act. Of course, we're waiting for the final text, and the EDA will be adapting its principles once the text is out. We're hoping that it will be out by July, so in a couple months. But this is really the important aspect for the DSA one of the important aspects is the transparency requirements for the DSA. And if I can say maybe, sorry.
Please.
No, if I can just say one last thing about in addition to all these new regulations, there's also, as I said, the enforcement of the GDPR. And what we're seeing is that sometimes new laws go beyond the GDPR, which is not a bad thing in itself, but it can have this impact of giving the impression, what message does it say to the efficiency of the GDPR if a law that was just passed 4 years ago is already being overhauled by other laws? And that's why it's important to go back to one of our priorities, is to have a fair and coherent ecosystem, a fair system where every player, whether they're big or small, can navigate and not get lost in all these layers of regulatory requirements. Yeah.
Thank you. As much as I understood, the digital marketing space so far was being embedded on the to create a frameworks to collecting the personal data based on the ROI, that's the investment to making a lot of the data, the more than data, than just analyzing how much user is coming to your website or your form, the page, then you analyze it. But I think it's supposed to be those analytical process is not the legal in next decades, probably under the data protection regulations. So how the European digital marketing company is thinking about this trend, and they are worried about it, they are in concerns that they somehow try to change their own behavior at this moment?
Yes. So this is I mean, this is a very broad question, obviously, but the companies in general, the industry, the data and marketing industry, has realized for a while that it's in everybody's interest to gain the trust of consumers. No company can thrive if they don't have the inputs, the trust of their clients. So we can see throughout the industry, the companies, European level, but I think at a global level, are really stepping up their game in making sure that they are compliant with existing laws. And usually when a company is active in several countries and they have to be compliant with several laws, it's usually in their interest, and it's usually what they do, to be compliant with the stricter law, because that will allow them to be, well, to have the same level everywhere. So this is obviously a good thing about the GDPR at global level. It's that it's really put in place a regulation that, of course, is not legally binding outside of the EU, but a company that works abroad, I mean, outside of the EU, they will usually expand the GDPR requirements throughout their multinational aspect, because it's just easier rather than having different implementations in every single country. Of course, the GDPR is not perfect, and other data privacy laws are coming into place throughout the world, and some will have perhaps a more different approach, better or worse. Nothing is perfect, but the GDPR allows this change, this growth, and this adaptation that companies need to do and realize they have to do to gain the trust of their consumers.
I understand. They think the consumer relationship is becoming more high priorities for the digital marketing space beyond just collecting the personal data. So absolutely. Yeah, I think thank you. This trend is succeeding to the next questions. So your organization is working with the consumer research with other stakeholders. I was also leading, then there was a very interesting insight, because each region has a different trend. Even the same consumer is using the same apps, the same services. So could you give us any interesting insight from your research and study for that? I probably regional difference is the one. So you have your own original feedback for them?
Absolutely, thank you. So for this, I'm going to share my screen again.
Sure,
so
please.
Give me just a second. So in addition to FEDMA, there's also GDMA, which is the Global Data and Marketing Alliance. It's kind of like the global sister pendant to FEDMA, but at global level. It's managed also by the FEDMA Secretariat in Brussels, and its objective is to promote a global data and marketing culture. So this goes back to your earlier questions about what companies and industries can do or should do. Well, GDMA is a platform that allows companies throughout the world to follow these updates, not only at European level. This is just a map of the current countries that are taking place, that are involved in some way or form in the GDMA family. Now, we've just published a fantastic and fascinating study called Global Data Privacy: What the Consumer Really Thinks. We just published it in March. It's the second global edition. The first one was in 2018, and it provides some fascinating insights into what consumers think about, well, obviously their right to privacy, but also several aspects related to marketing. So I'm going to go through a few of these, just kind of like a top level approach to this study, but I invite, of course, anyone to see the full report, which is very interesting. So just as a set the base, the coverage of the research is 16 markets. So over 20,000 respondents. You can see the countries here. Japan is one of them for the first time. In 2018, we had 10 global markets. So the ones in orange were already in 2018, which allows us a benchmarking to see an evolution of what's going on in consumer attitudes to privacy since 2018. But we've added 6 countries this year to represent over half the world population. So there's Belgium, Mexico, Brazil, India, China, and Japan were added to the pot. Now, I'm going to go really, I'm going to stay very high level because I don't want to give, to spend too much time on all the details and so on, but I think it's really interesting to see how the mindset of people have changed. So what we can see is that in the study, the study basically categorizes people into 3 different types based on, of course, on their results. There are the data pragmatists, the data unconcerned, and the data fundamentalists. So the data pragmatists show relatively high levels of concern about online privacy, but they are open to sharing data in return for better services. So these are the people that, yes, I'm concerned about how my data is used, but I understand that my data is used so that I can get something out of it. There's a value exchanged between myself as a consumer and the industry. And we can see that at global level, the data pragmatists are 53%, so just over half. But at Japan level, they're at 44, so just under half. Then we have the data unconcerned, which show relatively low levels of concern about online privacy in general. These people, for whatever reason, of course, the study doesn't go that deep, but for whatever reason, they are not concerned about their data online. We can see that at global level, it's 29%, whereas in Japan, it's 39%. So there's a much higher rate in Japan of data unconcerned. The third category are the data fundamentalists. They show relatively high levels of concern about online privacy, like the pragmatists, only they are not willing to share data in return for better services. They are more keen to keep it to themselves. You could put their data activists or consumer representatives, people who are just not really looking, who are not interested in sharing their data. And here you can see that at both global and Japanese level, the amount is relatively the same. So just under 1 out of 5 respondents identified themselves as a fundamentalist. Now, what we can see about the global trends about the issue of online advertising, we can see that when people were asked how concerned they were about online privacy as a whole, as a concept, at global level, we can see that in 2018, 75% marked that they were 7 to 10 on the rate, on the scale of concern. So they were, let's say, very highly concerned, 75. And in 2022, it dropped to 71. So of course, it's still a high number. And it's normal that people should feel concerned. But we can see that there is a decrease, which is positive. It means that people have more trust in the ecosystem. But when we compare with Japan, of course, we don't have the 2018 figures because Japan was just added to the research. We see that it's 61%. So there are actually less people in Japan that consider themselves very concerned as opposed to global figures. Now, when we asked about consumer happiness with the amount of data shared, so not the concept of data just of online privacy, but how much data is shared to organizations at global level, we can see that from 2018 to 2022, there is an increase of how much data is shared, which is also positive because it means that, yes, more data is shared, but more people are okay with it. When you compare with Japan, on the other hand, again, just for 2022, the number is much lower. So it seems that the Japanese consumers, or the respondents anyway, are, well, generally they generally don't agree as much with the amount of personal information of data that they give to organizations. Now, the foundations for a healthy data economy or data ecosystem are, as I've mentioned several times before, there's trust, there's transparency. So here, building trust is paramount. And I'm not going to go through every point. I'd like to just focus on these three. But when respondents were asked to rank the following in terms of what makes them happy to share their information, trust in the organization comes first, getting free services and products in exchange, and getting higher value goods for a lower price. These are ranked as the best or the most common answers for why they would actually provide their information. Another foundation for a healthy data ecosystem is transparency. That is, as I said, with our work on digital advertising, it is how we provide the certainty to consumers that they can trust the industry. It's through transparency. And when they were asked how important they feel about sharing their personal data with the company, based on different answers, we can see that we can see that the link between the data they share and the benefits are clear. That's definitely something important, but also transparency about how their data is collected and used. That's the last element on the chart. The third and final foundation for a healthy data economy is control. And here we would like that, well, the question was asked whether they feel whether they would like more control on the personal data, the personal information that they give companies. At global level, we can see that 82% agree. Yes, they want more control, which I guess is not surprising because who would not want more control about this? It's more interesting for the Japanese market because you can see that it drops to 68% for those who agree with wanting more control. 16% don't know, and 16% they disagree with this. So again, here it's more just a comparison to kind of show how the consumers or the respondents are different in Japan as they are to the global average. A few more statistics is how news headlines shape public attitudes to data privacy. Yes, it's clear that, of course, when you hear about a data breach or something that's been happening with the data that's been leaked, or a hack, or a fine against a company for not respecting privacy rights and so on, it shapes the attitudes of consumers. And we wanted to make sure that this was the case. And indeed, when we ask whether the headlines have an impact and shape their attitudes, we see that 71% in Japan do. That's a massive amount that agree, which is important for companies to understand that the optics are important. They need to show this to the world, to their stakeholders, their suppliers, their clients, to everyone, the media, and so on, because people do listen. Awareness of the national data protection regulation in Japan. So this was asked for every country. Of course, it's different in every country. So it doesn't really make sense to compare among countries, or not as much, because every culture is different and every regulation is sometimes not the same. But we can see that that there's also a clear agreement that they are aware of this regulation. And last but not least, just a question about COVID, because obviously this is something massive that has impacted the entire world in the past 2 years. So we asked consumers, respondents, how COVID had impacted their ability to share information now as opposed to before the pandemic. And at global level, we can see that 50%, 51, are equally comfortable sharing their data. Only 13% are more comfortable, and 26 are less comfortable. When we compare with Japan, we can see that a massive 47% of Japanese respondents are less comfortable sharing their data. 43 are equally comfortable, and 10 are more comfortable. So the more comfortable, I guess, is norm. I would expect to be in the lower figures. but the difference between less comfortable between global and Japan is very striking. And I guess perhaps of course, this is something that every country has lived differently, how people reacted to data being used maybe for COVID passes and so forth. So I'm going to stop here for the presentation for the study, but I invite, of course, anyone to go to globaldma.com to get the full report, which is much more in detail and actually tackles all 16 markets. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very impressive with me, since the Japanese consumer is thinking a little bit different from the other global standards to global level, because it's very important to comparative to the other regional trend, how the consumer is feeling in the different regions. Probably in our countries, in the different trust makers, the idea is not just being control ourselves and just reliable to any party. That's the kind of the Japanese characteristic. There is a very interesting features through your research insight that could be very helpful to take on the parts. So I want to move to the next questions about the future landscape. Through your research insights, we can see that a lot of the things in terms of the consumer trend. So what do you envisions the future digital marketing with consumer privacy? Because it's becoming the higher priorities for the data business at this moment.
Yes.
So could you give us your insights for that?
Absolutely. Sorry. So what we can see is that for the future landscape, there's a lot happening and it's going very fast. And this is why it's so important that we advocate for self-regulation in addition to regulation. Regulation is absolutely key to a healthy data ecosystem, but regulation can only go as fast as it goes in the whole legislative process, whether it's the European Union, member states, in Japan, or anywhere else. And self-regulation can tackle faster the growing themes of society in general. So this is why we advocate for self-regulation as an important factor to take into consideration in making sure that the rights and the privacy of individuals are respected. So for the future landscape, I would definitely see a stronger self-regulation to be more adaptable to the changing environment. For example, we're seeing the emergence of data unions. So a data union is an organization or a group of, it's a concept where users agree to give their data in exchange for money. So they will say, these people think that, whether right or wrong, that they're giving their data and it shouldn't be for free. Why would I give my data and not reap any benefit from it? They don't see the value exchange as getting ads or offers or something like that as value enough. And so they agree to provide their data in exchange for money. Now, whether good or bad, this is something that is a growing trend. And we need to make sure that this is well, I don't want to use the word regulated, but that it has to be in accordance to existing rules, both regulatory and self-regulatory, because we are risking the danger of monetization of data. And it has a very good aspect, but it can be dangerous if it's used, well, poorly. So this is something definitely that we're looking into or that we're following as data unions. But generally speaking, what we want to achieve is to strike the right balance between privacy and innovation. This is really the core objective of FEDMA, of GDMA, of the industry, is to find the right place where the industry is respectful of privacy, but is also allowed to innovate and to provide to the economy, to the ecosystem that basically the ecosystem depends on. The only reason we have a free internet at the moment is because it's ad supported. So there needs to be this conscience, this this awareness that if we ban, for example, certain things, such as there was a discussion last year about banning targeted advertising in Europe, it's going to be at the expense of a free and accessible internet. And I think in the fight for disinformation, it's very important that the internet remains free in the sense that consumers don't pay for it. But it's true that it has to be paid by someone. At the moment, it's the advertisers. Now, whether that comes to an end at some point, not anywhere anytime soon, but with the phasing out of cookies, we are seeing that the world is going more towards a first-party data rather than third-party data. But that only time will tell whether this is going to actually be confirmed. Now, at GDMA level, and I'll finish on this, is that we have published last year a set of global privacy principles. So it's 7 principles that we as GDMA and all our members and their members, we try to abide by these 7 principles of privacy, of trust, of fairness, of ethics, responsibility, keeping personal data secure, accountability, and so on. And we hope that these principles and in some form will be the self-regulatory way to go at global level to ensure that all industries respect these principles and the consumers that they represent or that they work for.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the consumer is becoming aware that the more and more important regarding their own data, not just giving it for free, just creating any specific values and returns themselves, then just control it through this. Some of the new project is coming. Data Union is the one of the great representative to create a new value through the data ecosystem. I agree that you have a seen on this new landscape in the data economy, then not just remain as the privacy is not just in a negative driver, it's just in a positive driver to create a new value. Yes. So that's a very important to notice. The marketers should concern the privacy is the key parts of the elements for the future business. So yeah, thank you. That's a very great insight. So lastly, I'd like to ask about any message to the listeners, because you had been working on this field many years and you have many insights and knowledge. So could you give us any message for that?
Yes, I would say, to speaking to consumers, to listeners, directly to people, is to feel empowered. That's they need to be empowered in their data, the use of their data, sharing their data, empowered in their rights of privacy, but also in understanding that the system works now in a way that there's a value exchange. And at the moment, that's the only way to keep the ecosystem healthy, is to find this right value exchange between consumers and industry. This is our objective at FEDMA, to striking this balance. And I invite consumers and your listeners to feel empowered that their voice is heard, and that their concerns are heard, and that the industry is acting on them.
Thank you. Yeah, we also try to improve this field and try to become a privacy first, and that's very important. Not just the data is just the data; it's becoming our consumers themselves, the data we can provide it. So that's very important. But again, yeah, it's great to have conversations and great to be shared with your insight through research analysis. That is very informative for the listeners, as well as that's a very sharing a great insight for them. So yeah,
It
I
was a
appreciate
pleasure.
it to have a great opportunity with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was really a pleasure to do that. And feel free to reach out if there's anything else I can provide.
Sure. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.